You know that movie where a ramp drops, cold water floods in, and men start disappearing before they even reach the sand? And you sat there gripping your armrest for the next 24 minutes, not entirely sure you were watching a film? That was Saving Private Ryan. Steven Spielberg, 1998. Tom Hanks as Captain John Miller, a school teacher from Pennsylvania whose hands won't stop shaking and who has been given the strangest order of the war. Lead a squad of 8 men behind enemy lines, find one soldier, Private James Ryan, the last surviving brother in a family that's already buried 3 sons in a single week, and bring him home alive. The cast around him reads like a before-they-were-famous yearbook, a pre-everything Matt Damon, a pre-Fast and Furious Vin Diesel, Tom Sizemore, Barry Pepper praying over a rifle scope. They made you hold your breath, ugly cry in the dark, and sit completely still through the credits. But the real story behind this film, the one that didn't make it onto the screen, is stranger and sadder and more ironic than anything Spielberg put in the script, because the man this whole movie is built around died in 1983, 15 years before it came out. He never knew it existed, and that's not even the most surprising thing on this list. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts about Saving Private Ryan that you probably didn't know. Now, before we get into it, hit that like button and subscribe because it genuinely helps the channel. And stay through number 1, because that's where Spielberg explains what this film was actually for. Not D-Day, not the Oscars. Something personal. And once you hear it, the very first shot of the movie looks completely different. Let's get into the countdown with number 15. Number 15, Tom Hanks made Saving Private Ryan more honest. Tom Hanks, as of 1997, was the nicest man in America. 2 Oscars. Known for playing a man who ran across America, a man who fought a disease no one wanted to name, a man lost in space with no way home. He was warm, he was beloved. He was the kind of actor you took your grandmother to see. And Spielberg, who had cast him specifically for all of that warmth, got cold feet on set about what came next. Mid-production, Spielberg told Hanks directly, "I don't think I want to see John Miller fire his gun and kill Germans." Hanks had already survived boot camp. He'd already been lying face down on an Irish beach for weeks. He looked at his director, his friend, his collaborator, the man who had flown him to Europe for this, and said, "I'm sorry, Steven, you're not going to get me all the way over here and turn me into some other guy just because you don't want Tom Hanks to kill soldiers." That wasn't the first time. On Forrest Gump, Robert Zemeckis had originally scripted Forrest to run away in confusion during the Vietnam ambush, not fight back. Hanks pushed back on that too. 2 different directors, 2 different wars. Same instinct from both of them. Protect the brand. Both times, Hanks said no. Spielberg came around. The film has Captain Miller killing people, and it's more honest because of it. The nicest man in Hollywood had to fight the director of the most violent war film ever made for the right to fire a gun. Hanks won. The film is better because he did. Number 14, The Private Ryan. No one was supposed to recognize. Here's the setup. Spielberg wanted an unknown for Private Ryan. Not just any unknown, someone whose face carried no associations, no previous roles, no baggage. His specific worry: if audiences recognized the actor, they'd spend the film watching a performance instead of believing they were watching a real man. He needed a face that felt like a face from a high school yearbook, not a movie poster. He found Matt Damon, cast him in 1997. Nobody had heard of him. Here's what Spielberg didn't know yet. Damon had just finished filming Good Will Hunting with his best friend Ben Affleck. Robin Williams had co-starred in that film, and during the Boston shoot, while Williams was location scouting the city with Damon and Affleck, they discovered Spielberg filming Amistad inside the Massachusetts State House. Williams walked them in and introduced them. Spielberg recognized Damon from a small part in Courage Under Fire, liked his all-American look, and offered him Ryan on the spot. Good Will Hunting opened in December 1997. Saving Private Ryan was scheduled for July 1998. In the 7 months between those 2 dates, Damon and Affleck won the Oscar for Best Screenplay. Damon was nominated for Best Actor. By the time Private Ryan hit theaters, the face Spielberg had chosen specifically because no one knew it was on every magazine cover in America. Spielberg's plan fell apart because Robin Williams wanted his friends to meet a director. By July 1998, Private Ryan's supposedly anonymous lead had an Oscar nomination. Damon is extraordinary in the role, but Spielberg spent the entire production trying to make audiences forget they were watching a movie star, while the rest of Hollywood was busy making Matt Damon one. Number 13, the $3,000 short film that launched Vin Diesel. In 1997, Mark Sinclair, who you know as Vin Diesel, was working as a telemarketer in New York to pay his bills. He had made a short film called Multifacial for $3,000, shot in 3 days, and got it into Cannes in 1995. Nobody came calling. Then he made a small feature called Strays. It played at Sundance in 1997. Spielberg happened to see Multifacial. He watched Strays next. And then, without an audition, without a meeting, without Diesel being on anyone's list, Spielberg had a role in Saving Private Ryan, written specifically for him. No audition, just the call. He played Private Caparzo, a decent man who breaks formation to help a little girl and gets shot in the chest by a German sniper in the rain. He dies holding a letter to his father. He's in maybe 20 minutes of the film. And when it was over, the doors opened. The Iron Giant followed. Then Pitch Black. Then The Fast and the Furious in 2001, which became one of the most successful franchises in cinema history. 11 films across more than 2 decades, over $7 billion worldwide. Number 12, Omaha Beach was actually Ireland. Spielberg's first choice was Omaha Beach itself. Of course it was. He spent months scouting. He applied for permits. France said yes, and then quoted him a 52% production tax on the entire shoot. That would have pushed a $70 million budget to roughly $95 million. He tried England, wrong landscape, wrong cliffs. He tried Scotland, wrong everything. An associate producer suggested Ballinesker Beach in Curracloe, County Wexford, on the southeastern coast of Ireland. It had the right sand, the right gradient from the water to the ridgeline. The Irish government charged a flat rate. Spielberg enlisted the Irish Defense Forces, brought in over 1,000 extras in total, and started shooting in June 1997. Problem solved. The most famous D-Day sequence in the history of cinema was shot in Ireland on a beach in County Wexford, using men who had never seen combat to play men who had never expected to survive it. Here's the kicker. The actual beaches at Normandy aren't usable anyway. Hotels, visitor centers, paved paths. The beaches where 160,000 Allied troops stormed ashore no longer look like June 6, 1944. On the Irish beach that summer, production crew pumped hundreds of gallons of red food dye into the water and detonated real explosive charges close enough to the extras that the sand shook under their feet. Ireland stayed neutral during World War II. It still provided the beach. Number 11, the real tragedy behind Private Ryan's rescue. Saving Private Ryan's whole premise rests on a real piece of U.S. military law called the Sole Survivor Policy. Most people don't know where it came from. It started in Waterloo, Iowa, in January 1942. George, Frank, Joe, Matt, and Al Sullivan enlisted in the Navy together. They had one condition. They would only serve if they could stay on the same ship. The Navy had a policy against it. They made an exception anyway. All 5 Sullivans were assigned to the light cruiser USS Juno. On November 13, 1942, a Japanese torpedo hit Juno during the Battle of Guadalcanal. The ship sank in 20 seconds. All 5 brothers were gone. The Navy didn't notify the family for nearly 2 months. On the morning of January 11, 1943, Thomas Sullivan was fixing breakfast at the family home on Adams Street in Waterloo, Iowa, when a black sedan pulled up outside. 3 men in naval uniform came to the door. He knew before they spoke. That tragedy forced the War Department to create the policy that made Private Ryan's rescue not just a story, but a legal requirement. The Navy broke its own rule for 5 brothers who wanted to stay together. Every film that came after, every Private Ryan, every rescue mission, starts with that one bad decision in 1942. Number 10. The real Private Ryan wasn't the last brother. The film tells you there were 4 Ryan brothers and 3 of them died. That part is essentially true. What the film leaves out is what happened next. Edward Niland, the eldest of the 4 real brothers, was a bomber pilot in Burma. In May 1944, less than a month before D-Day, his B-25 was shot down. His unit assumed he was dead. His mother, back in Tonawanda, New York, received 3 notifications in quick succession. Edward was missing and presumed dead. Robert had been killed on D-Day. Preston had been killed the next day. Fritz, the real Private Ryan, was pulled from the front and sent home. He spent the rest of the war as a military policeman in New York, convinced he was the last Niland standing. He wasn't. In May 1945, British forces liberated a Japanese POW camp in Burma. Edward Niland walked out of it. He had survived bailing out of a plane, days in the Burmese jungle, and nearly a year in a cage he couldn't stand up straight in. He came home weighing 80 pounds. He walked back through the door in Tonawanda, New York, to find 2 brothers buried in Normandy, and one brother who'd spent the last year thinking he was the only one left. Both surviving brothers rebuilt quiet lives near each other in upstate New York. Fritz became a dentist. Edward worked for the Veterans Administration. The film ends with Private Ryan surviving. The real ending is 2 brothers who came home, put it away, and never spoke about it publicly again. Number 9. Fritz Niland died in 1983. His daughters sat at the Hollywood premiere. He never knew the film existed. Frederick Fritz Niland came home, used the GI Bill to go to Georgetown University Dental School, became a dentist, and set up a practice in Western New York. He didn't give interviews. He didn't make himself available for documentaries. He was a private man who had been through something terrible, and he spent the decades after 1945 being exactly that, private. He died of a heart attack in December 1983. He was 63 years old. Before he died, he told his daughters, "Girls, never forget that it took a presidential congressional order to get me out of France." At his funeral, the names of every man in his company were read aloud. 15 years later, Steven Spielberg made a film about the worst week of Fritz Niland's life. When Spielberg learned the Niland story through historian Stephen Ambrose, he personally invited Fritz's surviving daughters to the Hollywood premiere on July 21, 1998. He arranged hotel rooms and limousine service and gave them personally signed hardcover books about the film. Fritz's daughters sat in that theater and watched Tom Hanks and Matt Damon act out their father's worst days in front of a crowd of movie stars. He never saw any of it. He never knew the VA hotline existed. He never knew his story had become the highest-grossing war film of its era. His daughters got to see what his story meant. He didn't. Number 8, The Real Captain Miller. Moment happened off-screen. The Corps Squad went through 10 days of military training, run by Dale Dye, a Marine Corps veteran who had done the same for Platoon. No phones, no trailers. Sleeping on the ground, eating rations, marching through exhaustion, while Dye screamed at them about rank, protocol, and how to hold a weapon. He called them by their character names and refused to break. It was designed to be miserable. It was. Matt Damon stayed home. Spielberg kept him out deliberately, so the squad would build genuine resentment toward him, mirroring their characters' feelings about the mission. 8 men dying in the mud for 1 man who gets to go home. That tension needed to be real. Damon confirmed it later. These guys are lying face down in the mud, and I'm in a bubble bath in America. When I showed up on set, a lot of that resentment just translated right onto the screen. Spielberg also skipped boot camp. His explanation? One of the gratuities about being a director is that you can volunteer yourself out of difficult details. By the time those 10 days were done, most of the cast was ready to walk. Vin Diesel recalled it directly. We were all exhausted. We all wanted to leave. Tom Hanks stood up. He told them that 20 years from now, they'd look back on this and wish to God they had finished it. He told them they owed it to the people they were representing to get it right. The biggest name in the cast, the one who could have been anywhere else, was voting to stay. They stayed. Before a single camera rolled, Tom Hanks gave the Captain Miller speech to the actual cast of the film, in real life, without a script. Spielberg, who had excused himself from the whole ordeal, heard about it afterward, which feels about right. Number 7, the war film Spielberg refused to cut. Hollywood studios treat an NC-17 rating like a fire alarm. Major theater chains won't carry it. Newspapers won't advertise it. The commercial damage is severe and usually fatal. When the MPAA looked at Saving Private Ryan, they considered giving it exactly that. Spielberg's position stated clearly to his team he wasn't cutting a single frame. If the MPAA rated it NC-17, He would release it NC-17, no edits, no negotiation. Tom Hanks made the public case. He told the Oklahoman, "It would have been a crime to prevent kids who can drive cars from seeing this picture. A lot of the kids who died on Omaha Beach were 17 years old. An NC-17 rating would exclude those under 17. Hold on, read that again. The rating designed to protect 17-year-olds from seeing this film would have barred people the same age as the boys lying dead on Omaha Beach." The argument wasn't about box office. It was about who the film was made for. The MPAA gave it an R. Spielberg later said he thought they did the right thing. But the version of this film that exists, uncut, uncompromised, the one that sent veterans to the VA hotline, only exists because Spielberg was prepared to torch the commercial release rather than touch a frame of it. Number 6, a darkroom disaster made D-Day look real. In June 1944, photojournalist Robert Capa landed on Omaha Beach with the first assault wave. He shot 106 photographs in the water and on the sand, handed the rolls to a courier, and got himself off that beach. 7 days later, back in London, he found out what had happened to them. A 15-year-old darkroom assistant named Dennis Banks, rushing to meet the deadline, had closed the drying cabinet doors on Capa's negatives. The enclosed space overheated. The emulsion melted. Out of 106 photographs, 11 survived. Life ran them anyway. The captions under the blurred, barely legible images explained that Capa's hands had been shaking badly from the stress of combat. His hands were fine. It was a teenager in a basement in London. Capa, who learned the truth only after being told the damage was from seawater, so he was lied to twice, was furious. Then he told the editors he would never work for Life again if they fired the boy responsible. He protected the kid who destroyed his life's best work. Those 11 ruined photographs became the visual record of D-Day, and 54 years later, Spielberg told the National World War II Museum that Capa's images, with all the vibration, the unsteadiness, informed every single inch of the photographic approach to Private Ryan. He and cinematographer Janusz Kaminski stripped the UV coating off their camera lenses, shot at non-standard shutter angles, and ran the negative through bleach bypass in post, draining 60% of the color. $12 million spent trying to recreate what a nervous teenager did by accident in 20 minutes. The caption said Capa's hands were shaking. They weren't. But Spielberg built the D-Day sequence that changed war filmmaking forever to look like they were. Number 5, Spielberg shot Private Ryan-like E.T. with devastating results. Almost no film is shot in chronological order. It's too expensive, too logistically complicated, too inefficient. Spielberg has done it twice. The first was E.T. He shot it start to finish because the cast was mostly children, and he wanted them to track emotionally where they were in the story at any given moment. He did it again on Saving Private Ryan, and did not anticipate what would happen. He told Roger Ebert, "It was a mentally demoralizing experience for us because we shot in continuity from beginning to end. We were all reliving the story together. The squad started together on the beach. As characters died in the script, those actors left the production, packed their things, said their goodbyes, drove away. The group got smaller and quieter as the weeks went on. By the final sequences, the men still on set had been living inside this story for nearly 2 months. The atmosphere in those final days was somber in a way that had nothing to do with acting, not performance, the real thing. I didn't realize," Spielberg said, "how devastating that was going to be." He used the same technique on a film about men dying in France that he'd invented for a film about a lost alien. He did not get the same result. Number 4, Tom Sizemore's best role came with one condition. Spielberg knew about Tom Sizemore's history with substance use before casting him. He cast him anyway, as Sergeant Horvath, Hanks's right hand, the most physically present member of the squad, and he did it with a condition. Daily tests, all 58 days. If Sizemore tested positive even once, on day 1, on day 57, on the final day of principal photography, Spielberg would fire him on the spot and reshoot every scene Sizemore had filmed from scratch with someone else. He had also turned down Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line, another World War II film, releasing the same year, to take this role. A single failed test would have cost him both. He passed every test. He gave one of the best performances of his career. He and Hanks have a chemistry that holds the film together, a shorthand between Horvath and Miller that feels like something built over years. Then, years later, those struggles caught up. His career unraveled through the 2000s. He died in March 2023 at 61, after a health emergency that left him in a coma, the set of Saving Private Ryan, one of the last clean stretches in a life that didn't have many. Number 3, the war film that reopened 50-year-old memories. Saving Private Ryan opened on July 24, 1998. Within 3 days, the Department of Veterans Affairs activated a national hotline and brought in extra counselors for evenings and weekends. Over 100 World War II veterans called in the first 2 weeks, more than the department had received from that generation in years. One veteran, Roy Gass, told CBS he got up at least a dozen times during the night after watching it. Another said it was like being back in battle. Men in their 70s and 80s were calling a hotline because a movie had sent them somewhere they hadn't been in 50 years. And then there's Rick Carrier. Rick Carrier was 18 years old on June 6, 1944. His job that morning was sweeping Omaha Beach for landmines. He watched Saving Private Ryan when it came out. He sat through the opening sequence, $12 million of recreated combat, nearly 3 weeks of filming, 40 barrels of red stage dye. He told CBS, "I want to tell you one thing. It wasn't graphic enough. I really mean it. Spielberg spent everything he had trying to show people what happened on that beach. The man who was actually there said he still fell short." Number 2, the son who turned his father's silence into cinema. Arnold Spielberg served in the Army Signal Corps during World War II. He was a radio operator and chief communications man for the 491st Bomb Squadron, the Burma Bridge Busters, a B-25 Mitchell unit targeting Japanese railroad lines and bridges in the China-Burma-India theater. He volunteered for 2 combat tours. He came home, he got married, he had children, he almost never discussed any of it. His son grew up in a house full of veterans. His father had them over, they sat around the table, and none of them talked about what they'd seen. Young Steven Spielberg made 8mm war films in the backyard, trying to understand through imagination what nobody would explain in words. Spielberg told the Los Angeles Times, "My dad was a veteran. He had many veterans over to the house, and I became absolutely obsessed with the Second World War, based on my father's stories, recollections, and also based on all the World War II movies that eventually began playing on American television." He called Saving Private Ryan a gift to my aging father. Arnold Spielberg got to see it. He lived to 103, dying in 2020. The film opens with an elderly man walking through the Normandy American Cemetery with his family behind him. As he moves through the rows of graves, he starts walking faster, separating from them. When he finds the grave he's looking for, he collapses to his knees in front of it. That's the image Spielberg leads with. A son, looking for a grave, trying to understand something the dead can't explain anymore. He spent 50 years trying to understand his father's silence. This is what he came up with. Number 1, the Oscar race that invented modern awards season. Going into the 1999 Oscars, this was not a close race. Saving Private Ryan had swept the critical awards season. Best Picture at the Directors Guild, the Producers Guild, the Critics' Choice Awards. It had 11 Oscar nominations. Steven Spielberg was, by any reasonable measure, the most successful director alive. Critics had called it one of the greatest war films ever made. The ceremony was on March 21st, 1999. When Spielberg won Best Director that night, it felt like confirmation of what everyone already knew. Then Harrison Ford opened the Best Picture envelope, Shakespeare in Love, a romantic comedy about a fictional young William Shakespeare falling in love in Elizabethan England, produced by Miramax, backed by Harvey Weinstein. Jaws hit the floor, literally. People in the audience gasped. And here's what nobody in that audience knew was happening behind the scenes. Weinstein, who had engineered similar upsets before, ran what insiders called the most aggressive Oscar campaign Hollywood had ever seen. Part of that campaign involved quietly feeding a message to journalists. Saving Private Ryan was only extraordinary for its opening sequence. After the beach, the story went, it became a conventional genre picture. DreamWorks executives started getting calls from press outlets, all asking variations of the same question, all with the same framing underneath. Spielberg's reported response to his team, I do not want to get down in the mud with Harvey. He didn't campaign. He didn't do the rounds. He let the film speak. Shakespeare in Love won 7 Oscars that night, including Best Picture and Best Actress for Gwyneth Paltrow, who is, by the way, Spielberg's goddaughter. In 2015, The Hollywood Reporter polled current Academy members and asked them to re-vote the 1999 Best Picture race. They chose Saving Private Ryan by a wide margin. But here's the thing. The Weinstein campaign didn't just steal one award. The tactics he used that year, the non-stop screenings, the hosted parties for voters, the whisper campaigns against competitors, became the template. Every major studio now spends millions running permanent lobbying operations for awards consideration. The Oscar season we have today, the one that starts in September and doesn't end until March, exists because of what happened in 1999. Weinstein didn't just beat Spielberg that night. He changed the game everyone else has been playing ever since. And when Academy members were finally asked what they thought, really thought, they said Private Ryan. 17 years too late. And there you have it. 15 facts about Saving Private Ryan. Which one hit you hardest? Tell us in the comments. And tell us which film we should cover next. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss the next one. Until next time.